Will it be, won't it be a mini drama in the gold market last week? Bloomberg calling it chaos. As gold hit a new record on Friday, pumping above $3,500 on the CNBC futures charts, we have $3,510 before pulling back on a True Social post. Hello and welcome to the Northern Miner Podcast. My name is Adrian Pocobelli. And yes, a statement from Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, on True Social, gold will not be tariffed, ! So there was concern. As Bloomberg was saying on August 8th, White House to clarify gold tariffs after ruling sparked chaos. That is the headline there. So a CNBC bullet point says here, gold closed at a record high Friday after U.S. Customs and Border Protection ruled that gold bars from Switzerland were subject to tariffs. And you kind of got a feel for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency because it's probably a little chaotic over there as well, with directives coming fast and furious from the top of the food chain there in the United States. So interesting mini drama over there. But on the gold point, there was another headline that came out on August 7th. China's central bank adds gold in 9-month buying streak. Now, that isn't a mini drama. I think we could call that more of an ongoing mid-level drama. People's Bank of China increased its gold reserve in July, marking 9 straight months of purchases that are helping it diversify its holdings away from U.S. dollars. Quite a statement. Again, this is Bloomberg News saying this. 10 years ago, that probably would have been seen as kind of a gold bug-esque sentence. So it just goes to show things do change over time. This brings a total tally of purchases since November, when the current wave of buying started, to around 36 tons. And finally, the round of buying is much slower than the previous one that started in late 2022, when gold prices were around half of their current level. Quote, we take it as a sign that the central bank wishes to minimize the impact of its activities on the gold market, end quote, said Michael Sway, an analyst with Deutsche Bank AG. So gold recapturing $3,500 on Friday, as high as $3,510 on the CNBC futures chart, and now just above $3,400. And what is the price? We are at $3,398.10. So continuing to fall with the news that gold will not be tariffed. Continuing on, a huge explosion at a U.S. steel plant has left 2 dead and 10 injured. So another disaster here. Now, U.S. Steel, of course, was the subject of much discussion in the last year, with Nippon Steel looking to take it over, acquire it, invest in it, and just a few lines here. Multiple explosions on Monday at a U.S. steel plant near Pittsburgh killed 2 people and injured 10 others, according to the company and local authorities. The blasts at Clairton Coke Works, part of a sprawling industrial complex along the Monongahela River, took place just before 11 a.m. Eastern. Firefighters battled flames and heavy smoke that billowed out of the plant, which is owned by U.S. Steel, a subsidiary of Nippon Steel. And there was no word yet on a possible cause of the explosion. But it just goes to show, as I was mentioning last week, in reference to the El Teniente miners that died in the mine, these are real-world businesses. You know, these are not people sitting in front of computer screens. This is the real-world business of the supply chain. So our hearts go out to the victims and to the injured in that massive explosion in Pittsburgh. Continuing on, an interesting story in the Financial Times, U.S. copper tariffs risk widening China's lead in metals processing, executives warn. This by Camilla Hodgson and Leslie Hook in London, who've been doing fabulous reporting, and Joe Leahy in Beijing. Donald Trump's copper tariffs risk reinforcing China's dominance in smelting rather than encouraging metals processing in the U.S., top mining executives have warned. So this is interesting because it seems to me this is not the goal. One imagines the goal of the tariffs were to encourage the development of mines and processing in the United States. It continues. The 50% levy on certain copper imports announced last week is part of the U.S. president's push to develop a domestic industry and end America's dependence on China for several critical minerals. But mining executives and analysts said copper tariffs would not be enough to provide an incentive for new U.S. copper smelters, energy-intensive facilities in which China has invested huge sums. The U.S. has just 2 operational smelters, while China has dozens. Talking to the Financial Times after the details of the tariffs were announced, Duncan Wanblad, chief executive of mining major Anglo American, said the cost of building copper smelters in the U.S. would be, quote, extraordinarily high compared to the average. When this all washes out, all we've done is embed a much more inflationary environment at a global level, end quote. This is a point I've been bringing up here, actually, which is one thing is to say you're going to reshore your metals processing, and there are many good reasons, and I would argue it needs to be done. But part of the issue is going to be if you reshore the supply chain, and your supply chain is way more expensive than China's, where does that leave, your car industry, as we're going to see later on in our introduction here? Where is that going to leave all of your manufacturing? This is the thing that China figured out, I would argue, over 20 years ago, which is if you control the metals and the metals processing and you do it better than everybody else and you basically dominate those industries, you'll dominate basically all other industries that rely on metal, which seems to be quite a few. Let's continue here. Andrew Forrest, of course, the proponent of green iron ore, Andrew Forrest, the billionaire chair of Australian miner Fortescue Metals Group, said tariffs would, quote, stop manufacturing growing in North America, end quote, and result in the exporting of jobs and industry. Tariffs are self-harm, he said. While the U.S. produces some copper ore, the raw material from which the metal is extracted, it does not have enough smelting capacity to refine all the copper that it consumes. The White House announced on July 30th that a 50% tariff would apply to semi-finished copper products such as pipes, wires, and cables, but excluded refined copper metal from the levy, a move that shocked markets. So last week it was copper, this week it was gold. According to the International Copper Study Group, as of 2023, China accounted for more than 50% of world copper smelter production, followed by Japan with 7%, Chile at 5%, and Russia with 4%. So another example here of how China dominates the market for a metal, which it doesn't even have the metal for. It's not like there's necessarily the biggest copper mines in China. It's because they dominate the processing. And now, as you're seeing with rare earths, it's not as simple as just going, we're going to build our own rare earths processing facility. There is an expertise here, and it's pretty darn advanced from the sounds of it. This is an interesting technological race. I'm not sure if it's really being framed that way, but when you take a step back, this is a technological race on metals processing, one could argue. Because it's not as simple, as I've been mentioning in previous episodes, as going, okay, we're going to reshore. The question is at what cost? Are your costs going to be double your competitor? And what does that mean for all of your manufacturing? I mean, Exhibit A, the car industry, as we're going to see here in some of the following stories. Last week's executive order from Trump said tariffs were necessary because of, quote, persistent threat of further closures of domestic copper production facilities, along with unfair trade practices abroad that have hollowed out U.S. copper refining and smelting, end quote. But Kathleen Quirk, president and chief executive of U.S. copper producer Freeport-McMoRan, said in an earnings call in July that it was, quote, not a given that you can bring on refined copper capacity very quickly, end quote. Building a new smelter in the U.S. would be, quote, very challenging, she said, noting that they were long-term investments. European aluminum producer Norsk Hydro echoed the concerns, noting that investments in new smelters, quote, cannot be made on the grounds of tariffs alone, which may disappear as quickly as they come, end quote. And this is another thing with all of the uncertainty around the tariffs. How are you going to put a 5-year plan to build a copper smelter with a 20-year business plan? Probably what these CEOs are thinking to themselves is, well, it's just better to do nothing. And it continues another very interesting point that we've also been discussing. The rise in Chinese copper smelting capacity has resulted in shortages of ore that feeds the facilities. Some smelters have even been paying to process ore in order to keep running. The facilities are expensive and problematic to stop and tend not to be restarted after that happens. Others have been forced to close because of the competition from China, including Glencore's Pisar smelter in the Philippines. If smelters have to pay for ore, more of those outside China aren't going to be able to survive, said one executive. So as these tariffs come in with the goal of creating copper smelting capacity, meanwhile, in the actual business of copper smelting, these processors are paying the miners to process their ore. So who is actually going to build anything here? With that being the case. Finally, Eric Heimlich, head of base metal supply at market analyst group CRU, said Chinese capacity would continue to grow while capacity elsewhere could shrink. Quote, the Chinese state-owned players, the big players, can withstand harsh market conditions for a very long period of time, end quote, he said. And I think this is how China sees this. And this is pure speculation on my part. I see them seeing this as the linchpin in their whole geopolitical, geoeconomic strategy. The key is controlling the metals processing, and if we have to subsidize and build 200 copper smelters in order to put everybody out of business, we will do that, because that will truly ensure our dominance and being the masters of our own fate, and perhaps most importantly, being able to dominate economically, because as long as we can make the cheapest metal in the world, we can have the cheapest products in the world, which means we can beat everybody on price. So the first hard thing for the West is realizing that metals processing has to be reshored. The second, trickier issue is how do you compete on price? And we are back to the whole notion of government intervention, whether that's tax cuts as part of a more free market solution or flat out subsidies. It seems to me this is the situation that the West is now confronting here. Who's going to build a copper smelter right now? Like, what kind of business is this? You are paying people to process copper. That is the situation out there from what we're reading. So who's going to build this? But nevertheless, you kind of need to build it, don't you? So where does that leave you? It's quite an interesting situation here. Turning to the rare earth situation, this is super interesting as well. A story from Reuters on August 7th, so last Thursday. China rare earth exports slid in July after hitting peak in prior month. So you might remember those wild headlines we were discussing of rare earth exports being up 660%. But what we observed was year on year, the month of June, they were actually still down somewhere in the neighborhood of 35% from the year before. And of course, these are kind of vague numbers at the end of the day because rare earths are really a whole bunch of different markets that get grouped together, which distorts, I would argue, a lot of the real stories underlying the rare earths market. So also something to keep in mind as we read these stories of 90% of the rare earths are processed out of China. Is it the heavy rare earths that you're discussing? In that case, it's 99%. In some cases, it sounds like it's 60%. So generally, the analysis and stories seem to have settled on 90%, but I'd argue it doesn't really illustrate the full nature of the issue. Let's take a look at this story. This is Reuters via mining.com. Rare earth exports from China slumped 23% in July after hitting a record a month earlier, customs data showed on Thursday. Although the preliminary data is too incomplete to draw firm conclusions about Beijing's commitment to speed up shipments. The world's largest producer of rare earths exported 5,994 metric tons in July. Let's call that 6,000, down 23% from June, when exports hit the highest level since at least 2014, data from the General Administration of Customs showed. China's rare earth exports are being closely scrutinized after Beijing agreed to a series of deals with the United States and Europe to increase shipments and ease the export licensing system imposed in April in retaliation for U.S. tariffs. However, it is difficult to draw conclusions from Thursday's data release, which does not distinguish between the different rare earths and related products, some of which are not restricted. The data is also very volatile, and double-digit swings in either direction are common. A fuller breakdown, including exports of rare earth magnets, will be released on August 20th. Continuing on, GM signs rare earth magnet deal with Novion Magnetics. This is Reuters via mining.com. General Motors has entered a multi-year deal under which Novion Magnetics will supply rare earth magnets for use in components of the automaker's full-size SUVs and trucks, the magnet maker said on Wednesday. Automakers, especially those focused on electric vehicles, are among the largest industrial consumers of rare earth materials. Ford executives, too, have said that a pinch supply of rare earth magnets from China disrupted production. Novion said the magnet deliveries to GM began in July, It said it was the only operational manufacturer of sintered neodymium iron boron magnets in the United States. Sintered NdFeB magnets are currently the strongest and most advanced permanent magnets commercially available. Interesting. And also, MP Materials posts smaller loss as rare earth production surges. This is Reuters via mining.com. MP reported record production of neodymium praseodymium, the two most in-demand rare earths. Prepayments from Apple deal will fund majority of capital investments. Stock up 8% after the bell. That's another big story. We saw Tim Cook in the Oval Office with President Donald Trump. What is the big concern that these two individuals have that brings them together there? And I just thought to myself, this looks like it's about rare earths. Another headline, this is Staff Writer at mining.com. MP Materials hits new high as it receives $150 million Pentagon loan. So the money is flowing for MP Materials. And we have a headline from the Wall Street Journal. USA Rare Earth sees surge in customer interest. The mining and magnet company says it has signed 12 memorandums of understanding and joint defense agreements to date. That's August 11th, so USA Rare Earth doing well. And another company, Vulcan Elements, has also raised money. This is an exclusive from the Wall Street Journal. Rare earth magnet maker raises $65 million in push to counter China. And another puzzle piece, really, to this entire narrative is Myanmar. And I checked if we had any updates over there, and we have a headline from Al Jazeera. Satellite images show surge in rare earth mining in rebel-held Myanmar. Satellite images reportedly identified 26 mines in rebel-held area of Myanmar next to China and 2 new mines near Thailand. So an increase in activity in Myanmar. And there was also another huge story that was an exclusive from Reuters on July 28th. With all of the news that I believe we missed, Trump team hears pitches on access to Myanmar's rare earths. And we've been hearing, little hints here and there about the U.S.'s interest in Myanmar. And so here on July 28th from Reuters, we have more confirmation. The Trump administration has heard competing proposals that would significantly alter long-standing U.S. policy toward Myanmar, with the aim of diverting its vast supplies of rare earth minerals away from strategic rival China. 4 people with direct knowledge of the discussion said. Nothing has been decided, and experts say there are huge logistical obstacles, but if the ideas are ever acted upon, Washington may need to strike a deal with the ethnic rebels controlling most of Myanmar's rich deposits of heavy rare earths. So, I was bringing this up on a previous show. Myanmar rebels were meeting with members of Congress last we heard, and it just seems that U.S. lawmakers are not going to think too hard about trying to strike up a deal here if their military is on hold. Among the proposals are one advocating talks with Myanmar's ruling junta to get a peace deal with the Kachin Independence Army rebels, and another calling for the U.S. to instead work directly with the Kia without engaging the junta. Washington has avoided direct talks with the country's military leaders following their overthrow of the country's democratically elected government in 2021. That seems to say the U.S. should back the Kia. Now, we had a story last year during the Biden administration that there was a sense that the West was backing the Kia. That never really got mentioned again, and from what we gather here, it looks like Washington doesn't have a hand in helping the Kia. So Myanmar continues to bubble over here, and it feels like it could bubble over at some point because this is right on China's border. And so if the U.S. starts getting heavily involved supporting the Kia, whereas China is currently supporting the military junta with their own version of the Wagner group, paramilitary out there helping the junta, you could potentially see a flashpoint coming up there. Another headline, this is Foreign Policy. America's military runs on Chinese rare earths. Quite a headline, but the Pentagon is hoping it can change that. As a subheadline, that's by Christina Liu at FP, Foreign Policy. So really just bringing readers of foreign policy up to date on what is happening with rare earths, and something we've been discussing here for months. Continuing on, another headline, Niger's military government seizes control of industrial gold mine from Australian operator. This is Business Insider Africa. As it says here, Niger's military government has announced the nationalization of the country's only industrial gold mine, accusing its Australian operator of, quote, serious breaches, end quote, as the junta intensifies efforts to gain control over the nation's natural resources. So more uncertainty in the Sahel for miners. another headline. This is from the UN News at the United Nations website, un.org. Deep sea must not turn into Wild West of rare minerals exploitation, agency head says. So as we were discussing last week, if the ISA, the International Seabed Authority, doesn't start putting out some kind of rules on the road, with the U.S. looking to move forward because they haven't signed up to the treaty, this could turn into a Wild West, as the agency head says. And finally, just on the car front, Tesla sales in Britain and Germany fall by more than 55% as China's BYD soars. This is CNBC. Wait till you see these numbers. Data published by the UK's Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders showed Tesla's new car sales dropped by nearly 60% to 987 units last month, down from 2,462 a year ago. In Germany, Tesla car sales fell to 1,110 units in July, down 55% from the same month in 2024. The number of Teslas sold in Europe's largest economy over January to July, meanwhile, plunged by 57.8%. In sharp contrast, China's EV giant BYD posted astronomical growth in Europe's two largest car markets last month. BYD sold 3,184 units in the UK in July, more than quadrupling its sales from a year ago. The company enjoyed similar success in Germany, notching a year-on-year sales uptick of nearly 390%. Again, so in the UK, Tesla sold 987 units last month, whereas BYD sold 3,184 units last month. So Tesla getting lapped by BYD, and they just put out another cheap car here, the BYD Atto 2, which is an SUV, which is selling for $21,700 US in China. And finally, Ford CEO just threw down the gauntlet at BYD and Tesla with its own $30,000 EV truck. So car prices about to come down. Big changes continue in the car industry, and metals and minerals, the building blocks of the supply chain, playing a crucial role in how this all plays out. Coming up, we have a wonderful interview with Women in Mining. We have Rim Fayjhi, Director of Women in Mining Canada, and Jennifer Berger, Board Advisor of Women in Mining Sudbury. They discuss how things have changed for women in the industry, what Rim Fayjhi's experience was as a new entrant in the industry, having just graduated a year ago, what it was like for her in university, as well as Jennifer Berger's experience in the industry and how things have really improved and what could be focused on and improved in the future. It's a wonderful interview. And also coming up in this week's Spotlight, we have Cold Block Technologies CEO Craig West, who discusses the company's cutting-edge assaying technology, how it's used by miners as well as other industries, and how governments are even interested in the technology as well. An interesting and topical discussion. If you want to find us online, you can find us at northernminer.com. You can find us on X at Northern Miner. You can find us on Instagram at The Northern Miner, and on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where we also host these podcasts, and wherever podcasts are available, including Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. And with that, let's turn to Craig West, CEO of Cold Block Technologies, for this week's Spotlight. Joining us today, I'm very pleased to welcome for the first time to the Northern Miner podcast, Craig West, CEO of Cold Block Technologies, Inc. Craig, welcome to the show.
Adrian, thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you on, Craig. Cold Block is in a very crucial part of the mining business in assaying. For those that haven't heard about Cold Block, could you tell us a little bit about the company and what you guys are up to?
Yeah, sure, Adrian. And you're absolutely right. Our technology is used in assaying, a part of the mining sequence or process that has probably seen very little innovation or advancement in many years. It's a process that's kind of critical to all aspects of mining, from early stage geological testing all the way through the mining operation itself, through milling and processing, and then concentrate shipping. There's a lot of assaying that goes on in mining through the entire process.
Okay, excellent. Now, as far as Cold Block, what is Cold Block doing? Is it distinct from, say, other assaying techniques?
Absolutely. I'll start by saying I think a lot of the assaying techniques that are being used in the industry are relatively unchanged, whether it's 4-acid digestion, methods that are being used in base metals or fire assay that's being used in precious metals. There hasn't been a lot of innovation, hasn't been an enormous amount of change, and it's still a process that takes a long time and that is fairly hazardous. So what we're doing and what cold block technology is we're used in the digestion step. So in order to do any kind of elemental analysis, in order to assay any kind of mining sample, you need to take that solid sample and turn it into liquid form. And once it's in liquid form, then it can be analyzed by someone else's piece of equipment, a mass spectrometer or optical emission spectrometer or an AA. There's lots of ways to analyze the fluid, but that process of taking the solid sample and getting it ready for testing is usually the longest, most challenging, most labor intensive, most costly part of the assaying process is that digestion step. So that's where we're involved. We have a relatively new technology. We've been as a company around for about 10 years. We've had a commercial product in the marketplace now for about 4 of those years. And yeah, so our technology is making that process much faster, much safer, and is providing the same exact results that the companies have been getting for many years, but it's just doing it better.
And how is cold block's technology, say, different from other assaying technologies?
It is quite different, Adrian. It's a very different means of doing the digestion. We're using infrared, and it is delivering the energy to the sample in a much more efficient means than the traditional methods that are out there. It's unique. It results in, substantially faster digestions because of how we are delivering that energy.
That's fascinating. And when you say companies, I mean, in a sense, who is using cold block's technology? Is it miners? Who is using this?
Depends, Adrian, who's running the lab. Very often we'll see at some of the larger, more senior mining companies, they'll have their laboratory on site at their mine site, and they'll run that lab themselves. All the employees within the lab will be their own employees, and they'll have their own processes, and they'll do their own assaying. We sell to them, and we have had many great sales. So some of the largest top 10 mining companies on the planet are now using our technology at their mining operations and are rolling it out and expanding it across their other operations. So that's one type of customer for us. Now, some of the medium and smaller size mining companies, they'll certainly still have a lab on site, but that lab is very often licensed out, or they've brought in a third party commercial lab to run that lab for them. We often see they call them site labs, is what the commercial laboratories refer to them as. These site labs use our technology as well. So we're working both with large mining companies, medium-sized mining companies, but also with the commercial labs themselves. And in fact, Adrian, that's been a real area of focus for us in the last couple of years, is focusing with these large commercial labs, because the entire industry looks to them. They look to SGS or Bureau Veritas or Intertek. They look to some of these large commercial labs as what is the best market practice? What is the best way to get the most accurate results? And so we're working with some of those companies, and they've taken our technology in, they've tested it, they've tried it, and they have verified how well it works, and they're in the process of rolling out that technology to some of their customers.
Okay, excellent. And so in terms of the metals, does it work in a sense, this technology with specific metals, or is this more wide ranging? Is this even beyond metal? What kinds of applications?
I mean, the technology is used across all metal types. Within mining right now, for most of the base metals and lithiums and uranium ores, you're using a digestion process, probably using a hot block method or hot plate to do your digestion is probably the most standard across the industry. And then on the precious metal side, you're probably using fire assay, which is just a pyrometallurgical version of what we're doing in terms of digesting the sample. So those companies are using those different methods across the entire spectrum of elements that are out there. And cold block is no different. We're doing the same exact thing as those other methods. We are digesting any kind of matrix that's out there where these elements are sitting. So we have done thousands of different types of samples across the mining sector, from around the world. You can see a lot of this on our webpage. There's a section called resources where we summarize and we highlight some of the test work that we've done and demonstrate the accuracy of cold block.
You mentioned companies and, say, large mining companies using this. Do governments ever approach you? I mean, there's a big concern right now about, metals processing, with China pretty much dominating many of the metals out there. Do you hear from other people who just think that maybe you could help with this attempt to, reshore the supply chain?
So I've mentioned sort of our two main customer types, which are the industrial mining companies themselves and then the commercial labs, but certainly beyond that, We've had interest from government agencies as well, though especially the government agencies that get involved in either metals trade business, in the concentrate trade business, or do some sort of either geological studies themselves. We have a unit in with the Canadian Geological Survey. So yeah, we do get approached by governments for our technology, especially those agencies that are interested in monitoring and or watching the types of material that are exiting their various countries. So yeah, certainly interest there. And I guess the one step beyond then, Adrian, as well, would be into the academic world. Our technology has been installed at a number of different laboratories in universities, starting, across Canada, but certainly we've branched out beyond that now. And yeah, our technology is being used in many different universities where we have, PhD students that are doing work to show how well cold block works and how it compares with the existing technologies that are out there. So yeah, we have a fairly wide range of customers.
Okay, very interesting. And in terms of the actual technology, I mean, is this one product or is this more of what we might think of as a suite of products?
We really have one product, Adrian, that is used across a wide range of different sample sizes. So we have 3 different variants of our primary Cold Block Pro Series digester, one that is used for very large sample sizes up to 30 grams. Our largest seller is our medium-sized digester that is used for a lot of the base metal applications, 1 to 5 gram sample sizes. And then we have a small one that is used for much smaller sample sizes. It's really the same technology, but it'll accommodate different vessel sizes or different test tube sizes that, allow it to be used for a wide range of sample sizes, depending on what the laboratory is using.
Okay, excellent. And we have a lot of people in the mining industry who listen to this podcast. What is it that you want them to know about Cold Block as far as what you're doing and how it might help them in their work?
Yeah, I think for a wide range of applications, whether it's a geology department that is running a number of samples and have sent them out to a commercial lab and they're waiting, 6, 8, 10 weeks for results to come back, I would say you don't have to wait that long. If that laboratory was using cold block, we typically hear from the labs when they switch from an existing, hot plate or hot block method to cold block, that they see at least a doubling in terms of throughput and a much faster turnaround time. So for that end of the spectrum, you don't have to wait that long for assay results. And then for the operating mines, very often we hear from a number of customers that when samples come into the site lab that's in the mining operation, they very often don't get results until the next day. And that causes, the operations to slow down, or you're waiting for results before you can act on whether a block of ore is ore or waste. You can get those results much faster. So just think about much more efficient mining operations from that end. And then certainly on the trade side, a lot of mining operations are producing concentrates, and those concentrates are being shipped around the world. And we are offering a technology here that can expedite the testing as things are getting loaded onto trains or onto ships. That testing process can be absolutely accelerated. And I guess for all of those applications, Adrian, from geological all the way through to end product, what cold block represents of great importance to many mining companies is a much safer way to do that process. It's a much safer process, safer sample handling. We're not doing any pressurization of acids. The burn risk is quite a bit lower. We're able in many applications to get rid of some of the nastier acids that are used, like perchloric acid. You don't need to use that with cold block. So it's a safer application as well as being, fast.
Okay, excellent. And as we start to wrap up here, Craig, where is this going? Where do you see the company heading in the next, couple of years here?
We've had a very exciting start to 2025 with a couple of the big commercial labs, not just verifying our technology, but starting to advertise its use to their customers. So they're out there saying, we can give you faster results. We can give you, the same accuracy. We can take more of your samples on. So that's been exciting for us to see those commercial labs get to that point where they're starting to advertise our technology. So what we're starting to see now is a lot more inbound interest from some of the mining operations that are out there. And so where do I see this going? I see cold block becoming very broadly a standard method of assaying, certainly across the base metal space and lithium and uranium and rare earths, but also into the gold side, where we will become a standard for many applications there as well. This is the new way that the mining industry will be doing assaying in 5 years' time. And our goal is to get there as quickly as possible with our business and with our technology. And it feels like we're seeing a really good acceleration of interest, just given the progress that we're seeing with these big commercial labs.
Craig West, CEO of Cold Block Technologies, Inc. Thank you for joining us and sharing everything you're working on at the company.
Thank you, Adrian. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you once again to Cold Block Technologies for sponsoring this week's episode of the Northern Miner Podcast. Turning to the website, lithium market soars as CATL shuts one of world's top mines. This is Bloomberg News via Mining.com. Just yesterday, lithium prices and stocks spiked on Monday after battery giant Contemporary Amperex Technology Co. Limited halted operations at a major mine in China, spurring speculation that Beijing might move to suspend other projects as it tackles overcapacity across the economy. Tianqi Lithium Corp jumped as much as 19% in Hong Kong, while Ganfeng Lithium Group surged 21% after CATL confirmed it had shut the mine in Jiangxi province. Australian and American miners also rallied. Prices of the battery metal on the Guangzhou Futures Exchange hit the daily limit and held firm throughout the day. Shares of U.S. producer Albemarle surged above 15% in New York, while Piedmont Lithium jumped by nearly 18%. Lithium Americas climbed as much as 13%, while Chilean producer SQM rose as much as 12% in U.S. trading. The fate of the CATL mine, the biggest in China's lithium hub of Yichun, had been under close scrutiny for weeks amid speculations that authorities wouldn't extend its license. The mine accounts for some 6% of global output, according to Bank of America, while other mines in the region account for at least another 5%. You know what I wonder to myself when I read this? With the whole rare earth debacle, are the US and, say, Europe starting to stockpile lithium at these rock-bottom prices, and does China notice and say, not with our lithium? I wonder to myself. And we have a quote, I think it will mean the lithium price in the near term has very big upside. End quote. Matty Zhao, co-head of China Equity Research at the lender, said in a Bloomberg TV interview. Another story, this is hilarious. Drones hover over CATL mine as lithium market anxiety rises. So this was late last week before the closure, and this is Bloomberg News via Mining.com, and listen to this. Traders have been flying drones over a lithium mine run by battery giant CATL in the hope of gauging the state of operations days before a key permit expires, a symptom of the acute supply anxiety that has gripped the market. I mean, this is quite something to hear. With lithium at $10 a kilogram, we're down 80% from where we were about 2 years ago. So traders are sending drones over the mine. That is quite something. And another headline, this is Bloomberg News via Mining.com, CATL suspends output at China lithium mine for 3 months. So interesting developments in the lithium market. Again, more signs of a bottom. Continuing on, platinum crunch comes to a head as US and China snap up metal. It's Bloomberg News via Mining.com. A years-long supply crunch in platinum has come to a head, with banks scrambling for dwindling stocks in London as buyers in China and the U.S. hover up much of the available metal. The market tightness has made platinum one of the best-performing commodities this year and fueled sky-high borrowing costs for the precious metal. Tariff fears have funneled large volumes to U.S. warehouses, while Chinese imports continue to exceed estimated domestic consumption. Kind of feels like stockpiling is going on here across the board. The upshot is a shortfall in the trading hubs of London and Zurich, pushing traders to guard supplies. Industry experts broadly agree on where the metal has gone, but the absence of reliable inventory data for London makes it impossible to accurately assess just how low stockpiles are. Quote, when a market tightens like this, whether it's for good reasons, bad reasons, idiosyncratic reasons, it should pull material out of the shadows. End quote, said Jay Tatum, who runs a metals fund at commodities-focused Valiant Asset Management and has been bullish on platinum for about 2 years. Lease rates suggest that, quote, acute tightness isn't over, he said. Continuing on, iron ore price rises on report China mills to temporarily halt output. This is Bloomberg News via Mining.com. Iron ore gained after a Chinese consultancy said several steel mills had been told by authorities they will need to temporarily halt production later this month due to air pollution concerns. Futures for the steelmaking material rose by as much as 1.6% in Singapore, following a 2.1% weekly gain. MySteel issued a report on Saturday that said some mills in the country's steel production hub of Tangshan had received notifications to stop producing from August 25th to ensure clean air during the September 3rd military parade in the nearby capital. Interesting developments there. Also on the steel front, Rio Tinto says no economic incentive for green steel in Australia. This is Reuters via Mining.com. So first we heard from BHP saying this is uneconomic, the whole green iron ore notion, now Rio Tinto has joined the chorus. As it says, Rio Tinto joined peer BHP on Thursday to play down Australia's prospects of building out a green iron sector that would help decarbonize the steel industry because the country lacks the economic incentives to do so. Australia is the world's largest supplier of seaborne iron ore and has been striving to build a role as a reliable source of green metals. In February, the government allocated $652 million US to support the manufacture of green iron and its supply chains. Since Australia's iron ore is mostly too low grade to be directly processed into steel with renewable energy, it needs an additional processing step. When this is undertaken with hydrogen made from renewable energy instead of coal, the product is called hydrogen direct reduced iron, DRI, or green iron, a low-carbon base for making green steel. And here is a quote from Rio Tinto's Chief Technical Officer, Mark Davies, who said, quote, "Today I don't believe there is an economic incentive for anybody to move to a hydrogen DRI," end quote. The technology was unproven, and there were complications moving from existing processes using natural gas to hydrogen, he told a business lunch in Melbourne. Quote, "And doing it in Australia is expensive. It's an expensive place to build stuff," end quote, he said. What does that sound like? I mean, doesn't that just sound like the copper smelter quote that we heard earlier, I believe from the CEO of Freeport-McMoRan? So again, the part one of this whole situation is the West needs to reshore and build its metals processing capacity. Where the rubber's going to meet the road, though, is on cost. And that is going to be a really tough nut to crack, as we're going to see here. So super interesting development there. Another story, Codelco collapse was likely caused by mining rather than nature. This is Bloomberg News via mining.com. So that collapse at the El Teniente mine was being blamed on an earthquake. Let's see what it says here. The seismic event that caused a fatal collapse at Codelco's biggest mine in Chile is likely to have been caused by mining activity rather than nature, according to a person with direct knowledge of the matter. The probable scenario being used inside Codelco is that the incident was caused by geological stresses resulting from the project's own extraction processes rather than any naturally occurring shifting of tectonic plates, the person said, asking not to be identified given an investigation is ongoing. El Teniente, one of the world's biggest underground copper mines, has been halted since July 31st, when 6 workers died and 9 others were injured following a 4.2 magnitude event that caused part of the operation to collapse. The tremor affected a newly developed area known as Andesita, so perhaps a not entirely natural cause. A few more headlines. Barrick seeks $3.5 billion financing for Pakistan copper mine. It's by a staff writer at the Northern Miner. Another headline, Barrick falls after posting $1 billion charge on Mali mine. It's Bloomberg News via mining.com. And so, of course, Barrick losing control of the Loulo-Gounkoto complex in Mali. And finally, Northern Dynasty gets Pebble court dates. This is by Colin McClelland at the Northern Miner. And so Northern Dynasty has secured its first detailed court schedule in months for its long-running dispute with U.S. authorities over one of the world's largest undeveloped copper-gold projects. So it continues with Northern Dynasty, and finally, Caterpillar sees U.S. tariff hit of up to $1.5 billion this year. And you can read the whole story by Bloomberg News on the mining.com website. Those are your news stories. Now, let's take a look at metal prices. And turning to metal prices, let's take a quick look at the bond market for context. The U.S. 10-year bond is yielding 4.28%. That is 0.06% higher than last week. The UK 10-year gilt is yielding 4.6%. That is up 0.06% on the week. The Italy 10-year bond is also higher at 3.52%. That is 0.05% on the week. The German 10-year Bund is yielding 2.7%. That is 0.07% higher on the week, and actually the highest we've seen for quite a few months when it just touched 2.86% about, let's call it 4 or 5 months ago. The Japanese 10-year bond is yielding 1.5%. That is up 0.03% on the week. And the China 10-year bond is yielding 1.73%. That is 0.02% higher than last week. So Not only do Chinese companies have the benefit of their country running the metals supply chain, the so-called building blocks, but their cost to borrow almost near the bottom. So the competition is fierce out there between these economies. Turning to precious metals, gold is trading at $3,402.20 per ounce. That is down $20 on the week. Silver is trading at $37.92 per ounce. That is 46 cents higher than last week. Platinum is trading at $1,332 even. That is $5 higher than last week. And palladium is trading at $1,141 even. That is $44 lower on the week. So mixed bag with precious metals. Turning to industrial metals, copper is trading at $4.44 per pound. That is a penny higher than last week. Iron ore is trading at $101.22 per metric ton. That is $2 higher than last week and back above $100. Aluminum is trading at $1.17 per pound. That is a penny higher than last week. Lead is trading at 91 cents per pound. That is 2 cents higher than last week. Nickel is trading at $6.95 per pound. That is 10 cents higher than last week. Tin is also higher at $15.25 per pound. That is 11 cents higher than last week. Cobalt is unchanged at $15.12 per pound. Lithium is back above $10 at $10.37 per kilogram. That is 43 cents higher than last week. So lithium continues to show signs of a bottom. Uranium is trading at $71.95 per pound. That is 50 cents higher than last week. And zinc is trading at $1.28 per pound. That is 3 cents higher than last week. So it seems to me that metals are showing some firmness. We see across the precious metals a kind of consolidation of higher prices compared to previous months. And as well, even copper at $4.44, that's not below $4, which we were at only, 6 months ago. So you zoom out enough, it seems to me that metals are showing some firmness at a higher price level. So metals showing resilience, and those are your metal prices. Coming up, I'm very pleased to welcome Rim Fayjhi, Director of Women in Mining Canada, and Jennifer Berger, Board Advisor of Women in Mining Sudbury. They discuss the Trailblazer Awards, which are coming up and which will be handed out at next year's PDAC, as well as all of the new initiatives that Women in Mining are working on, what the organization is about, and how the industry is doing in regard to women in the mining industry. Rim has just graduated from university a year ago, is a new entrant, and Jennifer Berger has 20 years experience in the industry, so it's great to hear from both their perspectives on what is happening, again, with women in the mining industry. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and I will see you on the other side. Join us today. I'm very pleased to welcome for the first time the Northern Miner podcast, Rim Fayjhi, Director of Women in Mining Canada, and Jennifer Berger, Board Advisor of Women in Mining Sudbury. Jennifer, Rim, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having us.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. It's always good to check in with women in mining. Of course, I'm always delighted to go to the events when I can. When I go to PDAC, oftentimes there are wonderful events that take place at that wonderful conference. So it's great to have you on. Rim, let's start with you. As far as women in mining, what is new with women in mining? What is happening at the organization these days?
Yeah, we're very excited to announce our Trailblazer Awards for the upcoming year. So we've just launched that, and these awards are a great way to celebrate women that have shown leadership, innovation, and help other women advance in the Canadian mining industry. So we have 5 awards, and those would be the Trailblazer Award, Indigenous Trailblazer Award, Student Trailblazer Award, Indigenous Student Trailblazer Award, and finally the Rick Hudson Mentorship Award. So we're very excited to announce those.
Okay, excellent. And so what is the Trailblazer Award? How did it get started?
That is an excellent question. I wish I knew the entirety of the history of it. I can tell you about the Rick Hudson Mentorship Award. That one is more recent. And that is after Rick Hudson, which passed away and was a great mentor for different students. And in his honor, this award goes to uplift and show someone that has been mentoring students and has been mentoring women, anybody in the mining industry. And this award, contrary to the other ones, is open to everybody. So men and women can apply. And I think that is a great addition to the Women in Mining Canada Trailblazer Awards, because it's not just women that contribute to women in mining. It is a group effort.
From what I understand, Rim, you've been out of school, out of university for about a year. Jennifer, have you attended previous iterations of the awards?
Yes, I have. I have attended a number of the awards ceremonies at the PDAC, as well as last year, the Sudbury Women in Mining chapter hosted their first gala awards ceremony, and we're excited to be having our second one here in Sudbury in November.
Okay, excellent. So there's a federal and I guess we'd call a local chapter version of the awards. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, excellent. So, Rim, what is it like for you? You've been out of university for a year and now you're in the industry, and here you're with Women in Mining. What has it been like for you? How would you describe and characterize your experience in the mining industry as a new entrant and as a woman?
It's definitely a wonderful experience, I'd say. I have graduated recently about a year ago, and then I started working on site. So, as you may imagine, there's definitely not that many women on site, but nonetheless, everybody's very welcoming, and it's a great experience, great learning experience. And I feel like being on site as a woman, it is very fulfilling. So definitely has been a great experience in the industry. I don't think I would have chosen any other industry. I'm very happy with my choice, and I hope that other women and other students get to experience this. So in my case, I remember starting university, I really liked STEM and the sciences. I knew I wanted to be an engineer. I wasn't 100% sold on studying in mining just yet, so I told myself, I'll give it a try. I'll try my first internship. And after working for 4 months in industry, it was just such an amazing experience. The challenges we face, the technical problems that you have to solve are very fulfilling. And I don't regret my choice a single bit.
Well, it's great to hear. I mean, I like to call it the real world business of mining. It's like, you can take all the theory in the world, but at the end of the day, sometimes you just got to solve the rock issue that's right in front of you, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, very interesting. And that's great to hear. Just finally, before we go to Jennifer, Rim, how would you describe the universities? Like, were you the only woman in the class, or are things starting to even out a little bit in, say, these advanced geology classes?
Oh, I'd say they're definitely starting to even out. In my year, I was not the only woman. There was another girl in a class of 20. So it is getting better. And I remember volunteering for the open house, and you could see that there was interest from varied people. And one of the questions we would receive is, oh, is it safe for a woman? Is this industry welcoming to women? Am I going to have career progression in this industry? And it may have been more difficult in the past. Jennifer can comment on that, but I feel like it is definitely changing, and I can sense the change. There are many professors that will mentor all students equally, and you will get those same opportunities as your male peers. So I can definitely see that the gap is slowly closing. We're nowhere near 50-50 yet, but I can see that there are more young women joining this industry.
Well, it's good to hear. Yeah, as you say, it sounds like there is still a long way to go. If 2 out of 20, I actually thought it would be higher. So it is quite interesting, but at least there are 2.
Yeah.
Jennifer, turning to you, I mean, how have you seen things change over the course of your time in the mining industry? Have things changed? I assume they have, but you tell me.
Absolutely. Things have definitely changed. I've been in the industry over 20 years. And when I initially started, working in the field, I had one field season where I was the only female working amongst a team of male colleagues, working underground. My first experience there, again, I was the only female working underground with, over 120 male representatives on site at a remote mine. Didn't have proper facilities, proper safety equipment, equipment that fit. It has definitely changed. I mean, it was incredible to stand on the stage at the Women in Mining Sudbury Gala last year and see women being honored in our industry, or to have been a part of the Women in Mining Canada Trailblazer Awards ceremonies in past years. I mean, to see women being elevated and recognized at a national level in our industry, honestly, 20 years ago, I never thought I would see the day. What is still alarming is that mining has the lowest number of C-suite representatives of any industry group worldwide. So while we've made significant progress, we still have work to do. But events like the Women in Mining Awards, certainly, help to empower women and elevate them within our industry.
That's great to hear. And as far as, women say who are joining the industry, in a sense, to concretize this a little bit, I mean, what do people, in a sense, get? Why should they join Women in Mining in, say, like on their local chapter or federally?
I definitely think that the network and the community sense of it is a good thing to get out of joining your local Women in Mining chapter. And I find that for women and men, you can learn about challenges people have gone through and how they've overcome them. It can also be a great spot for people to find mentors and for people to find mentees and help the next generation. So I think it's a great networking opportunity and definitely mainly a great networking opportunity.
Jennifer, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I would say access to, tools, resources, training. It's a great way, to improve your personal and professional skill set, not only by leveraging those networks, but access to resources as well.
Okay, excellent. So getting down to the details then, Rim, on the awards. So these take place at PDAC, is that correct? And what are the awards? Is it a trophy or is there something more?
So there is a trophy for the awards. For the PDAC aspect of it, the results are announced at PDAC for the general public. And for the technicalities on how to apply, it would be through our website, so wimcanada.org, and there you can find the different applications for the different awards. It differs slightly, and the deadline for applying would be December 5th, 2025 at 5 p.m., which is a Friday. For the actual awards, so there is a trophy, and for the student aspect of it, it does come with a scholarship, which can be very helpful for students that do have an impact in the industry. It can help them financially as well.
Okay, excellent. And Jennifer, who should apply to this? Is it basically any woman who's in the industry or are there other criteria?
Diversity in nominations is really key, for the success of these awards and the event. And we want to make sure that we've got representatives, from the trades with technical backgrounds, Indigenous backgrounds. We're not just looking for executive level recipients, and people can self-nominate or they can be nominated by, peers, colleagues, friends, family. So it is wide open in terms of those who can put their names forward to be considered.
Okay, excellent. Rim, do you have anything to add to that?
Definitely what Jennifer said. And I'd add to that for the student part of it, if I had to give a recommendation, it would be just not to be shy and self-nominate. Answering the essay questions is a great experience to get to know more about yourself and where you stand and what you want from the mining industry and what you want to give back to the mining industry. So I would definitely recommend for the student awards that any woman tries applying because it is a great experience to just go through that thinking process.
And Jennifer, you've been in the industry for 20 years, as you said. What is it you think that the mining industry could do more of right now in regard to, say, women in mining? Is there any kind of standout issues that you think could be improved?
I think highlighting women in the industry, irrespective of roles, is very important. It shows that there is opportunity within the industry for multiple types of careers, professional experiences. Highlighting women in leadership is also key. I know for myself, I joined an organization that had a woman in a vice president role. And the reason I did that is because I could actually see the opportunity for career progression, for myself. So I think just continuing to put focus on women in the industry, visibility is key.
Okay, excellent. And Rim, do you see any, major barriers that you've encountered that you think are unfair or should be removed? Like, what sort of things have you seen since you've started or even in the university setting? Is there anything that really stands out to you that you think could be improved for women?
From my experience, the biggest difference is when I compare my major, which was mining engineering, to other majors, it was the low percentage of women. But other than that, there has not been, as a student at least, in my limited experience, I haven't encountered any major roadblocks. And I found that people were pretty supportive, regardless of my gender, in whatever I aspired to be. I did find that some of my female peers would experience imposter syndrome and sort of limit their own opportunities they would seek. And I found that having a good mentor and being encouraged in that sense is a good way to overcome that challenge, which some women do face.
I might add advocacy is critical in our industry as well. And I mean, advocacy can happen from anybody in the industry, regardless of gender. It is important to have those allies and people that are really supporting your career progression and your professional experience.
And on that point, and Rim brought it up as well, but Jennifer, in terms of, say, mentoring, how do you see things? I mean, say, if you go to Women in Mining as a new entrant, I guess mentoring can happen anywhere, right? But are there any sort of special ways that this is facilitated, or is it simply, okay, everybody, let's all hang out and, maybe someone ends up as a mentor of sorts? Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I think mentorship can happen actually, with those who have, significant amount of experience in the industry, as much as it can happen with those who are just entering the industry. We learn from each other. And so, that mentorship relationship, it's important and it's critical in our industry. There are formal events that happen that provide the opportunity to actually build those connections and establish those formal relationships. I know the International Women in Mining, they do a mentorship program annually. And then there's local events at the various chapters as well that facilitate making those connections if you're looking for a more formal relationship.
And Rim, what has your experience been? It sounds like you found a mentor. Like, how did you find them? Was it just kind
Yeah.
of through happenstance, circumstance?
Yeah, I feel like my experience in the mining industry, I didn't just have one mentor. I was very lucky that people have been incredibly helpful to me, and I've managed to talk to so many different experienced people that have graduated, let's say, 5 years before me, people with 10 years of experience, people with 15 years of experience. So it would definitely depend on which stage of my studies I was in. For example, when I was just starting out, my mentors were the final year students, just people that answer any questions. And then as I was going forward in my studies, I would talk to people with more experience and they would guide me and answer any question, no matter how silly it would be available for me. And I met them mostly through networking events. When I was studying, I was based in Montreal, and there would be a lot of Women in Mining Montreal events among CIM events and other mining industry events. And there, when the events would be catered to students, I found it very easy to go up and talk to anybody there because they know that people there are students, so they will be asking all sorts of questions. And it just happened naturally. Although there are some organized mentorship programs through the CIM, in my case, it was just through talking to people and asking people as well as keeping a contact with them.
Okay, excellent. And as we wrap up here, Jennifer, what is your advice, say, to women who are entering the mining industry? Do you have any thoughts of things that they should think about as they move forward in the industry?
Yeah, I would say it's important to leverage those networking opportunities and to really build your professional network. Make sure that you have, strong allies, you have those mentors, coaches, available to you. There are times in this industry when it's difficult and you need that support system around you to really ensure that you have this, the strength to overcome those challenges. Those relationships can also open doors for you in your career. So I would definitely encourage people to get involved in Women in Mining Canada or local chapters and just take advantage of the opportunities that they provide.
Sound advice. Rim, let's finish with you. Can you remind us of the dates for the Trailblazer Awards and the information that people should take away from our conversation here?
Yeah, for our Trailblazer Awards series, the application is now open and the deadline is Friday, December 5th, 2025 at 5 p.m. ET. So please go on the wimcanada.org website and apply. And I encourage everybody to nominate their female peers or nominate themselves.
Fabulous. Jennifer, any final thoughts?
Let's take advantage of this opportunity to really, highlight our next generation of trailblazers, as well as to recognize those who have, spent some time in the industry, really advocating for women in the industry, encouraging women to enter the industry. Let's take the opportunity to recognize and celebrate the women in the industry that are leading.
Rim Fayjhi, Director of Women in Mining Canada, and Jennifer Berger, Board Advisor, Women in Mining Sudbury. Thank you for joining us and telling us all about what you're working on at Women in Mining.
Thank you so much, Adrian.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you once again to Cold Block Technologies for sponsoring this week's episode of the Northern Miner Podcast. If you want to learn more, go to coldblock.ca. And thank you also to Rim Fayjhi and Jennifer Berger for appearing on this week's episode. And thank you, dear listener, for continuing to support this program. If you want to help out the podcast, please leave us a review in the Apple Podcast directory, share it with your friends, and until next week, take care.